Good morning, U.S. history students. I hope you're all doing well. It is Wednesday, March 25th. Let's continue with our World War I unit. So, Zimmerman telegram pushes America into war. Congress is asked by Wilson for a declaration of war, and by a resounding margin, they give it to them. So, America has to scale up and get moving. All right. Now, we are going to be fighting this war in Europe, obviously, not here in the United States, which is an advantage to us, but also a disadvantage in the sense that you now have to move men and weapons, and remember the sophistication of these weapons now, all over to Europe. Britain is going to be our main launching point because the Germans are in France already. Now, I think you did learn about Lenin and the Bolsheviks last year in Global 10. So the communists are going to overthrow the constitutional government in Russia, who had just overthrown the Tsarist government the year before, I believe, or maybe actually in February of the same year. And the Russians are going to be out of the war. So there's less support for the Allies at that point in time. Now, Wilson is going to issue something called the 14 points. This was to reassure Americans that we should be in this war, what we hope to gain from this war, what our aims, what his vision is, kind of set out to reassure Americans that we are doing the right thing, because there was a lot of people in America that did not only agree on going to war, but which side we should be on, but also that we should not go to war at all. This was Europe's problem. Let's stay over here. But a theme that has been developing in these last few units is the increasing globalization of the world and interconnectedness, if you will, in the world. If you're going to trade with everybody and everybody's going to fight, then how are you going to stay out of the fight? And that's what America is kind of wakening up to at this point in time. So he talks about, a few of the key points here is self-determination for all nations. That means that the people of the country decide who their leaders are, what type of government they're going to have, what values they want reflected in their legal system. Okay? So he doesn't believe that one country should take over another and make it part of an empire. He believes that each nation should decide for themselves who exactly they are going to be. Freedom of the seas is exactly what it sounds like. It means that everybody should have the ability to trade on the open ocean, move their ships and their people around without any interference. Free trade, similar, okay? Nations should be able to trade with each other without, giving protective tariffs or benefits to one country over another. That the countries of the world should have the chance to compete with each other fairly, okay? Open diplomacy, we talk. And I always say this, when we're talking, we're not fighting, we're not killing each other. So he wants more discussion between world leaders about things like freedom of the seas and self-determination and free trade. And probably the most interesting part of this is the creation of a general association of nations to preserve the peace. Now, this is going to be his big crowning achievement, if you will, at the in Paris at the Treaty of Versailles in 1919 and 1920. And when the war ends, he is going to call for a League of Nations. He is not going to get the League of Nations, which we will discuss in the next unit, but it is the precursor to the current day United Nations. Now, the United Nations is on First Avenue in New York City. It's that big black building as you're driving in, right on the river. That is not going to take place or be enacted until after World War II. So it takes 2 world wars for us to realize as a globe that when countries are talking to each other and where there is a forum for discussion, there is less chance, at least, for misunderstandings that might lead to terrible wars. So keep that in the back of your head, the League of Nations and then the United Nations. All right, now, U.S. is going to swing the tide towards the Allies. We're going to show up with men and guns and leaders and money, and we are going to rescue the Allied forces during this war. We get involved right at the end, and push the balance towards the Allies, and it gets wrapped up rather quickly. So let's see here. General John Pershing is probably the biggest general name that you should be familiar with from World War I. When we get to World War II, we'll be talking a lot about Eisenhower and MacArthur, but Pershing put 1,000,000 troops together, okay, and helped push back the outnumbered and exhausted German army, which was in full retreat. So you're basically on a west to east trajectory through Europe, fighting and pushing the German troops back towards Germany. In a way, everybody kind of beat up on each other. We came in at the end fresh, reserved, full of men, full of weapons, full of money, and were able to win. We saved Britain. We saved France. We don't know what Europe would have looked like without our involvement. So November 9th, the German Kaiser is going to abdicate the throne. Germany's going to sue for peace. Remember, the peace treaty will be at Versailles, which we will talk more about over the next couple of days. More than 100,000 Americans are going to die. 1% of the over 10 million that are killed. So in terms of scale, that should give you a little bit of a idea as to how significant the Americans were, because they were able to come in and clean it up quicker, probably saved lives. But in terms of the overall cost of the war, in terms of death, we did not bear much of the brunt of that. The other European countries did. Now, the wartime state is the biggest war, biggest in scale, that America has ever seen. So, federal government's going to take on more power. Not necessarily constitutional, but they are going to argue that it is a time of crisis or a time of emergency, and the president and the federal government needs more power in order to do their duty in winning this war. Okay? So we will have never seen a federal government this strong. The Selective Service Act, 1917, 24 million men required to register for the draft. And that still goes on today. I believe when all of you turn 18 by law, you have to register for selective service, meaning that if there was ever a draft in this country, which I don't think there ever will be, but if there ever was, and you are able-bodied and of the right age and gender, you have to go to war. So this is not the first time that there is going to be a draft. The Civil War was actually the first time that America had a draft, but it's going to be significant in terms of the numbers, and our army is going to swell from 124,000 all the way up to 5 million. New federal agencies to regulate industry, transportation, labor relations, agriculture, to direct and coordinate the war efforts. We need food. We need mobilization. We need workers to work. We need farmers to plant. We need people to work in order to move the war effort towards a place where we can win. It has to be more coordinated as a result, okay? Can't have businesses doing whatever they want and states doing whatever they want and these people pitching in and those people not pitching in. So the federal government takes more power unto itself in order to make sure that that is going to happen. As a result, businesses make money, yes, but workers actually take a step up because they are now considered more essential, regardless of what you make, okay? If it is essential to the war, or it's essential to just daily life during a war, people are going to appreciate more those who make those products. So as a result, wages are going to rise, working conditions are going to improve, union membership is going to double. It's sort of interesting in American history. Crisis has always brought about the most wide-sweeping changes that we've ever had. Not senators and congressmen and state politicians or local politicians or even the president talking about things. During peace times, very little changes. During wartime, during crisis time, during economic depression time, those are the times where people have come together and started to make things better for more people. Now, corporates and individual income taxes are going to rise. The government needs money. So they are going to start to tax the wealthiest at 60% of their income. I believe the top income tax bracket for the federal government today is 35%, just to put that into some sort of scale for you. Tens of millions are going to buy Liberty bonds. It equated to patriotism. A bond is an IOU. So if the government were to issue bonds called Liberty bonds to raise money for the war effort, American citizens and companies would buy those bonds get paid back over time with interest, so it is an investment. But in the meantime, they are also supporting the war. And bonds are issued all of the time. If the town of Smithtown wants to build a library and they don't have enough money for it, they might issue a bond, and people of the community or businesses in the community would support that by buying the bond. So it's a positive both ways. You're helping the government, you're helping society do something, but you're also getting a return on your investment. The propaganda war. We talked a little bit about propaganda with yellow journalism during the Spanish American War. Propaganda is advertising, typically political advertising. So, what kind of ads do you think we're going to use here? Pro war ads, pro patriotism ads, pro everybody working together, anti German ads. And they are going to, the biggest thing is that they're going to realize that it works, that people actually change their minds through advertising. And you could even argue that the advertising business or industry in this country is going to take some of their cues from what the government does here in their private business endeavors over the next few decades. So Wilson creates a committee on public information. You need pro support for this war in order for it to be successful. It's a major undertaking. So this committee on public information is going to be out there explaining why we're doing what we're doing. We're trying to push the opinion that we're doing the right thing and that there is something to gain here. There is a benefit to what we are doing, whether that be to protect money or democracy or Christianity. There could be many, many different angles on why we're doing what we're doing. But Wilson talked about making the world safe for democracy, meaning that more democratic countries meant more opportunities for America. Okay, so we're talking about pamphlets, posters, newspaper advertisements, motion pictures. All of these were the conduits, if you will, to getting the information out there to people. And there's some examples here. Wake Up America, civilization calls every man, woman, and child. I Want You for the U.S. Army, that's Uncle Sam asking you to come into the military to help Uncle Sam. And you see America all over this. Destroy this mad brute. Enlist in the U.S. Army. And you have the word culture in German there, and they're depicting the Kaiser with the Kaiser's helmet on as a brute, as a gorilla, carrying the Columbia. Okay, if you remember the Manifest Destiny picture, the Angel Columbia, they fashioned that now the Germans were going to come after her and take her. Okay, and to the right we have the buy the U.S. government bonds, halt the Hun. The Hun is another word for German. Okay, let's finish there, and we will pick up on women's suffrage tomorrow because I don't want to rush it. I hope you're all well. Hang in there. Email me with any questions. The quarter ends on Tuesday. We will have 2 more grades by then, the DBQ that I will be putting up on Friday morning, and also the test on Tuesday. Hope you're all doing well. I'll speak to you soon. Thanks.